Welcome to the Seventh Dispensation Podcast. My name is Mark Jones, and I'm the CEO of the Seventh Dispensation. And today we're going to be finishing up, and we're going to be continuing with the chapter of my book, Alpha Quam, and the chapter is called The Respite. Now it says, he ruled the United Kingdom. David had made peace in the region, and his black son Solomon maintained the peace until his death in 922 BC. Solomon was the son of Queen Sheba of Arabia. The Greeks called her Bathsheba because of the legend that David saw her bathing and began lusting after her. Sheba was a black queen of Arabia, and Solomon is the product of an interracial relationship. After the death of Solomon, the devils regained power and civil wars once again arose. During this 500-year exodus and conquest, our knowledge was being taken by these devils back to Europe or destroyed. Our culture and people were being destroyed and erased out of history as the devils began to call themselves the chosen people of God or Jews. They took on the name Israelite because some of them were trying to submit to the will of God. Israel means to strive with God. And those who submitted to the will of God were called Israelites. After the devils had conquered Judah and Israel, they later became known as Jews. And this is why I'm trying to tell y'all that it's a difference between the Israelites and the people who call themselves Jews. And this is what, when Jesus in the Bible said, y'all not the real Jews, y'all pretending to be the Jews, he was talking about the people calling themselves Jews pretending to be the Israelites. But the authors of the Bible, they mixed it up because they didn't understand what Jesus was saying. But Jesus was saying that the people calling themselves Jews are not the real Israelites. And this book substantiates that by telling you that when some Caucasians conquered Judah and Israel, they later became known as Jews. But the people who originally occupied or lived in the land of called themselves Israelites. The real chosen people of God are the Israelites. It say the Greeks had come to power around 600 BC, and they helped the Egyptians regain independence from the devils in Assyria. The devils in Persia tried to conquer Egypt in 525 BC. In 404 BC, the Greeks had helped the Egyptians regain power. The Greeks were after the knowledge and wisdom of Africa because they were already a dominant force in Europe. Alexander the Great had now come to power, and he was a great student of African wisdom. When the Persians tried to conquer Egypt again in 343 BC, they weakened it. Alexander the Great moved in around 332 BC and conquered Egypt. This is what opened the door to the great theft of African wisdom. Man, listen, man, this history. Listen, this history. It says that, man, they wiped us out of history. They erased everything about black people. This is why we don't have no knowledge of ourselves or our forefathers or nothing, because they erased it all. They destroyed it all and rewrote it. and wiped us out of history, right? So we don't have no history. When you look at African history, they try to start us with slavery in America. Or if you go to Africa, they try to start the Africans' history with the apartheid. You see what I'm saying? They wiped us out of history. So we don't know nothing about our African kings. We don't know nothing about our African queens. We don't know nothing about the people who wrote the scribes and scrolls that they stole. See, we don't know nothing about the scientists who recorded the history of the world. We don't know who they were, because they destroyed everything about us that could let us know how great and powerful we are. So let's get back into this book. Now I say Alexander founded the city of Alexandria, and after his death, a Greek family called the Ptolemies came to power and ruled for almost 300 years. Ptolemy I, one of Alexander's commanders, established a kingdom run by a Greek and Macedonian elite with Alexandria as their capital. Egypt then became the center of Hellenistic culture, science, and education. This is why a lot of countries in Africa have submitted to pagan worship. The Ptolemies built the world's largest library. The world's first museum is also located in Alexandria. This is the perverted and corrupted Greek knowledge that they stole from out of Egypt. This was not the original Egyptian culture. The Ptolemies also seized control of Palestine in 300 BC and ruled there until 198 BC. The Greeks allowed the Caucasian people who were already in the land occupying it to run their own affairs as a temple state. The highest priest headed the Jewish government, and the law of Moses served as its constitution. In Syria, Seleucus, a Greek, established a vast kingdom that eventually reached from eastern Mesopotamia to the Aegean Sea. A Greek by the name of Antiochus III came to power and wrestled control of Palestine from Ptolemy V in 198 BC, but was later defeated by the Romans. Antiochus V called himself Epiphanes, meaning God manifest. I mean, listen what Antiochus called himself. God manifest. So you got to think, man, they was calling themselves gods because they knew that the Egyptians were the gods and goddesses and they were conquering them. So now they saying we God manifest. So now listen, he appointed a pro-Syrian high priest in Jerusalem. The high priest's name was Jason, who immediately introduced Greek laws and customs. The Jews and the Greeks fell into opposition over this. Antiochus then banned obedience to the law of Moses and required all Jews to conform to pagan practices. Antiochus in the Greek sacred temple set up a pagan altar for sacrifices to the Olympian Zeus. We still pay tribute to Zeus every year in honoring the Olympics. This is what led to the Maccabean uprising in 166 BC. There were 14 centuries of wars, disease, and poverty created by the Caucasian exodus and conquest. The result was the destruction of humanity and our adherence to monotheism. So we got monotheism. Now listen, because this telling, like, remember, it's a big debate about polytheism and monotheism. The polytheists that they talk about in Islam and in Christianity is us. The many gods. It ain't that we worship a bunch of different gods, that we were calling ourselves God. We were God and goddesses of the earth and of the universe. So when, according to this book, when they took over, according to this book, it was 14 centuries of wars, disease, and poverty, right? Created by the Caucasian exodus and conquest. And the result was the destruction of humanity. This is when God was wiped off of the earth. There was no more gods. They destroyed our people. It was, and what they did was they implemented something called monotheism. They said, those people are no longer the gods of the earth, but we're gonna make it one God, Yakub, who created us, because that's who created them, Yakub. And that's who they worship, Yakub. You know what I'm saying? That's the one God that they talk about. That's the only God they're gonna ever worship. They're not gonna worship no black person, no Indian, no Latino. They're not gonna worship none of us as a leader or as a God, because that's all a God is a king, a leader. That's why they don't acknowledge none of us as leaders or nothing, man. The only people they worshiping is Yakub. That's it. Then it says Africa, Palestine, and Arabia were completely wiped out of history. See, you can't find no black history in Palestine. You can't find no black history in Arabia. You can't find black history in Africa that talk about the kings and the queens, the black kings and queens. You can't find no African history that talk about black gods and goddesses and nothing. They wiped all of our history out. We have no history. Now listen, it said Palestine and Arabia had their culture and identity destroyed. Listen, Palestine and Arabia had their culture and identity destroyed. That's why you don't got no black culture and no black identity in Palestine or Arabia. It was destroyed. Then it said, and both had fallen into pagan worship. Africa, however, still had that spark because the continent was never completely invaded. Humanity was still in that part of the world being preserved by the original scientists. Now listen to what's going on here so you can understand what's going on in the world today with Donald Trump and with the Republicans and with the Democrats and what they trying to do to keep us unconscious and keep us from ever awakening. Because our awakening is what ends their power to rule. Now listen, it says, around the 1st and 2nd century BC, Rome had gotten started forcing nation after nation to surrender to their military might. After the death of Julius Caesar, the Roman Republic collapsed from civil strife. Octavian rose to power and became the first Roman emperor. Octavian reorganized the administration of the Roman Empire and established what is known as the Pax Romana, or Roman peace. And see, if you look at Donald Trump today, right, he trying to make a peace, some kind of peace agreement where he trying to get everybody to sign something like they about peace. When you just went and did some war with Venezuela, but now you trying to get everybody to sign something like you for peace. See, and this is the same, what he's trying to do is reenact what's called Pax Romana. That's what Donald Trump trying to do. If you look up Pax Romana and then look at the stuff what Donald Trump trying to do, talking about they having some kind of peace agreement with the world, they trying to reinvent that. And I say Octavian changed his name to Augustus, the Exalted. and ushered in a long period of prosperity from about 30 to 180 AD. In 66 AD, the Jewish revolt against Rome broke out, and by 70 AD, the Romans destroyed the temple in Jerusalem. Emperor Constantine came to power in 306 AD and ruled to 337 AD and took Christianity to be the religion of Rome. First, the Greeks translated ancient African wisdom into Greek around 400 BC. The Jews rendered the Pentateuch in Alexandria, Egypt around 300 BC. Ptolemy II, a Greek who was king of Egypt from 285 to 246 BC, organized 72 scholars from Jerusalem to come to Egypt to begin the translation of the law of Moses. The traditions of the Pentateuch were gradually supplemented, and translations of the African wisdom as well as other writings that are now in the Apocrypha. This work became the Septuagint and served as the Bible for the Jews of the diaspora. Now, it wasn't a book called the Bible. It's just saying the Septuagint was a book that they used the way we use the Bible today. So the Septuagint was like a Bible to them that we use today. The way we go to church and study the Bible, everybody got a Bible. Everybody back then had a book called the Septuagint. Now it says, the Christians in the 1st and 2nd century also used this translation to make their New Testament. Then in the 3rd century, Rome began its translation based on the Greek translation, which was already perverted and corrupted. See, now we're getting into the making of the Bible. See, now we leading up to where the Bible came from. Because now you got them, they got these books, they done stole all this information from Africa, they done killed all these African people, they done erased Africa out of history. Now they making books and making it seem like they the authors of knowledge and like they know all about God and all this stuff, right? So now we leading up to King James and the making of the Bible. So it says, in 1603, oh man, I was right on point. In 1603, King James I had assembled his 54 scholars from various universities to work on his version of the Bible, which appeared in 1611. In 1607, James Ussher became the first professor of divinity in Dublin, and later wrote his book of Annals, placing the origin of man at 4004 BC. Archbishop James Ussher belonged to the Anglican Church. He was born in Ireland in 1535, and he was also one of the scholars who helped produce the King James Version of the Bible in 1611. Ussher wrote the Annals of the World and placed the beginning in 4004 BC and ending with the fall of Jerusalem in 700 AD. The book was published in 1650 AD. King James I was a Scottish king who was also a Mason. Freemasonry found its way from Scotland down to England under the auspices of King James I. Now listen, King James is the one who brought Masonry down from Scotland to England. That's who brought Mason to the England, King James. And then it says, listen, Freemasonry is built off of our history, and all of its signs and symbols derived from ancient Egypt. Freemasonry roots lie in families and gals bound in ancient allegiance to the stewards and the steward monarchy. That's who they everything is in allegiance to the stewards and the steward monarchy, the whole Masonic temple, the whole Masonic order. Now listen, it say all you have to do is study the 30-year war, where Catholic victory threatened continental Protestant with extinction, Stuart monarchy in particular, and Britain in general. See, this is why the Masons don't like the Roman Catholics. That's who they first went to war with. The Roman Catholic Church went to war with the Masonic Temple. They was fighting over power. Now listen, this is how the fugitives of England ended up in America. See, now we're getting into the Founding Fathers. Because nobody knew who the Founding Fathers were. Nobody knew why they were sent to America. See, they was kicked out of England. They was kicked out of Great Britain and was sent over here. They were the Masons. And they was beefing with the Roman Catholic Church. Now listen, and they was called fugitives. So they sent them over here. Now listen to what this say. This is how the fugitives of England ended up in America. Thus this country was born. The seal of America is a Freemasonry sign. So in 1603, King James I began assembling his 54 scholars to work on his version of the Bible, which was completed in 1611. During this time, we were being enslaved, exterminated, and colonized by the European powers under the blessings of the Roman Catholic Church. See, y'all gotta understand, the Christians, the Roman Catholic Church, the preacher, was involved with slavery. They was the ones in power and control of it. So listen, Portugal. Now we finna get into the Latinos. Because I want y'all to understand, see, the Latinos are really Indians. But now we finna show you how they became Latinos. And this says that Portugal and Spain were involved in slavery as early as the 1400s. So it is obvious that Usher and James were well aware of our heritage and the age of the continent from which we derive. These Europeans were trying to establish a white supremacist worldview. So they rewrote us out of history and established the Greeks as the founders of civilization. And this is why when you go to college, right, they don't be teaching you nothing that the Egyptians said, nothing that the black leaders from way back in the day when who were the gods and goddesses taught. They don't tell you nothing like that. They tell you what the Greeks said and what the Romans said, and they try to make it seem like the Greeks and the Romans are the scholars and know all the knowledge. And when everything that they teaching, they stole from Africa. Now listen, because they was trying to establish a white supremacist worldview. Now listen, it say, remember at this time, we were being looked at as less than human beings. While the European powers were pulverizing our country's culture and knowledge for the purpose of profiteering off of our resources and enslavement. The respite, that's what we're talking about, the respite. Satan was allowed to rule for 6,000 years. And then God comes to exalt his nation of righteous after the destruction of the wicked to rule. Satan promised that he would deceive us all and cause us all to deviate. This is why he has to create a religion for us. A lot of Islamic scholars have studied and translated the works of the Greeks and Romans which caused them to incorporate pagan practices into their religious beliefs. Now listen what it's telling you about Islam. Islam incorporated pagan practices into its religious beliefs because the Arabs were studying the Greeks and the Romans. Knowledge that they took from Africa and stole from us, then rewrote it, translated it, and then when the Arabs came up, the Arabs started studying the perverted and corrupted knowledge that the Greeks and the Romans stole from Africa. Now listen, these scholars are not prophets or messengers of God, and they only lead the people astray. You gotta look at this. The biggest war in Islam came from the Islamic scholars who rose up and they became Sunnis and Shiites and all these different type of Muslims, and they went to war and started beefing. That's where it came from. Now listen, the time has come for the dead to rise and for a change of vision, ideas, and concepts of life so that we see life with balance, ancient wisdom, and human perfection, which comes from by being obedient and submissive to the true source of power, which is God. God is the source of peace. Listen, God is the source of peace, harmony, and balance. So listen, when you look at the world, right, and you look at all the religious people who've been here all these years, right, telling you that they for God and that they with God and that all this stuff, right? If that's true, yeah, where is the peace, where's the harmony, and where is the balance in the world? If y'all really represent God. If they really if the Jews, the Muslims, and the Christians really representing God, where is the peace, the harmony, and the balance at in the earth? Because that's what God brings, man. If God was really in existence in this world, it'll be peace, man. It'll be harmony, it'll be balance. Right, this is how we become one with the universal order. The only protection that we have against Satan is to be self-controlled and alert. God is the nature of self. Now I'm gonna finish this page up, and then I'm gonna save the rest for next week. It says, our power lies in peace and unity. Our power lies in the peace and unity of Africa, Arabia, and Palestine. We control the natural resources, but we have allowed our countries to be ruled over by others. We must create an alliance that is set on truth and justice so that we may protect ourselves against the onslaught of our enemies. Africa has been excluded out of history as a force of power. There is no country that sees us as a force, and it is because we have done nothing for self. We have to rise up here in America and do for self, because we are the only ones to set justice in the earth. 4,000 years of lies and cover-ups coupled by death, disease, and poverty is enough to make anyone say no more, man. God has come to raise the dead, and he has given us the greatest revelation in the world today, and all we have to do is become a nation and set up our government. We must submit to the universal order of God and set justice in the earth. For almost 500 years, we have been walking in darkness. This darkness is the slave master's religion. We are under this shadow, submitting to the darkness. The messenger of God was a light for us. He was the light that would allow us to see ourselves in our proper perspective. But there is still another light at the end of the path that we are traveling, and this light is freedom. So I'm going to continue this next week. So next Thursday, I'm going to see y'all to finish this up. Peace.